by Tolstoy. I know this is contentious. I'm not asking people to take my word for it. If they think that I'm capable of writing these myself, thanks so much.
Okay, yeah.
I take that as a fantastic compliment. So
Okay.
I'm either a brilliant writer of literature, or I'm quite a good medium. It's one of the two,
The Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence, where politics is not the answer, materialism counts for nothing, and spirituality will set you free.
Richard.
Hello, Darren.
So we're back for part 2 of this incredible story that we were sharing last week, and I thought I'd just put people back in the picture again. So this is 3 poems that you had published in Psychic News, one of the most prestigious psychic journals, certainly the Journal for Mediums. And last week what we shared was a poem that you had received from Dante.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to listen to that, just want to hear some of the discussion about that, go back to last week and check it out. But this week I wanted to go on to 2 others that you received, kind of as part of, which you published as part of this kind of article here. Mm-hmm. And I think what's incredible, just to highlight again for anyone tuning in for the first time on this episode, is that these are actually sort of like insights into the 9 freedoms, which, as you say, they are studying there.
That's
on
the whole point
realms.
of it, and that that is in the Psychic News article. It's made crystal clear. So I got to give credit to Psychic News, which is, I think, started in 1932, a very reputable, almost like the medium's Bible, you might say, in terms of a journal. And they published this completely straight, and it's certainly different from a lot of the other sort of mediumistic stories you get, which can be, as I said last time, more domestic, but helpful to some people. This is very elevated, and it's all about the 9 freedoms, which is being studied. And Dr. King made this absolutely clear on the higher realms, and they are gaining far more from the 9 freedoms than most people on this realm. And of course, the 9 freedoms is our core teaching on the Spiritual Freedom Show.
So I think I'll just say before we get into this next one here that not only I think is this an incredible demonstration of channeling and therefore evidence of that, but also we've got here these 3 literary greats, and as you say, they are studying this teaching, which we are all being inspired to study here as well, and to make a part of our life.
Indeed, yeah.
So last time we had Dante, we were talking about bravery. You gave it the title, The Currency of Truth.
Yeah.
I really encourage anyone to go back to that. It's a spiritual teaching in and of itself, I felt. I mean, a lot of inspiration there, and even a call to arms for anyone inspired in that way. But tell us a little bit about the second one that you
just before we leave Dante, one thing he made very clear to me is that he's a massive admirer of Dr. George King. And this, I think, is why he even bothered to speak to me.
Okay.
Because he knows I was a very close disciple and friend of Dr. George King. And that to him is probably my calling card. Plus I could, with a lot of effort, actually receive the message. Yeah, but coming on to the next one, this was given sometime later. It was given in the 28th of December 2014 by Tolstoy. I know this is contentious. I'm not asking people to take my word for it. If they think that I'm capable of writing these myself, thanks so much.
Okay, yeah.
I take that as a fantastic compliment. So I'm either a brilliant writer of literature, or I'm quite a good medium. It's one of the two, because these are really good. Now, the Tolstoy one actually isn't strictly a poem, I should say. It's in prose. And when I got it, as I mentioned last time, my conscious mind was fighting it a bit. You have to completely detach from that. You can't think about it at all, because I don't know much about Tolstoy or Russian literature at all. But if I was going to try and imitate Tolstoy, I wouldn't have written this. I'd have written something about sort of somebody in the army who met a beautiful woman in a noble house or something.
I see, yeah.
But this one is called The Lion and the Lamb. That's my title, not his title.
Okay.
Shall I read it?
Yeah, please do.
A rampaging lion roams the jungle, teeth bared, on the lookout for his prey. The call of the wild has brought him here, and naught can stop him now. A lamb caught in the thicket bemoans her lot. Too loud, he hears it, and swoops down upon her tender frame. But lo, what song disturbs the scene of imminent destruction? A warbling sound from the trees above, distracts them both. And then these words are spoken: "Release this lamb, and you will be fed. For it does not belong here. It is the Lamb of God." The warbling stops. A strange silence pervades the scene, and in that silence something happens. Love passes through the jungle. Its radiant glow enfolds the lion, who stops in his tracks. What feeling is this? A light falls upon him, and in that light he feels no hunger. His warlike passion subsides, and something new fills him: peace. He looks again, the lamb is gone. Even its scent has disappeared, and the thicket is empty. He sits and rests, mouth closed. The light subsides, the sounds of the jungle resume, and there before him is a carcass, appetizing, ready to consume. He looks again and thinks carefully. I will eat that later, but first there is much to reflect upon. And so a lion became the first king of the jungle because he was king of himself.
It's like Christianity and yoga teaching rolled into one, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
a beautiful thing. It's inspired by the second freedom, and written in less than 5 minutes. When I received it, and I think what they did, they took a theme. So Dante was bravery, this was love, and then wrote around it, and it's a parable. And I later found that he wrote something I didn't know called Stories from Zoology. And they were parables using animals.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's completely unknown to me. And I think maybe it was written for children, I'm not sure. And it's in that kind of style, but there's some beautiful things in there and a great message in there.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful and profound message there. And as you say, it's amazing that this is not his mainstream, well-known style, as you would say, and not the one that you would imitate if you were trying to pass something off as Tolstoy. This is something that, much lesser well-known, one you didn't even know, and yet here it is, sort of manifest in that style.
And I should put a caveat in, which is that I don't know I mean, some people have told me the Dante style is very close to the sort of tenor of Dante, and I've even had, with the one that was in God's Guides and Guardian Angels, somebody said to me, well, that, before I revealed that it was Dante, that is just Dante.
Really?
Who knows Dante? I couldn't have said that, really. This may or may not be similar to the style of Tolstoy, I just don't know. But then, of course, people evolve, people change. And as I said last time, I don't know for a fact that all these three writers have not reincarnated in the meantime, but they've come back and used that persona. That does happen, by the way, in communications.
I see.
And, in order to deliver this, they assume a life may not be their last life. So there could be some differences in style, but the use of a sort of parable using animals is something he did, which I didn't know.
Can we just, to put people more like in the scene of the experience, people who might be, starting to develop their own psychic abilities, people who are starting to, just to give people a sense of what is it like when you are being contacted with a message like this?
Well, let me tell you the first time it happened.
Okay.
Very clear-cut time it happened. It's in my book, Unlock Your Psychic Powers. And I went to visit someone, I think it would be 1980, that long ago, so we're talking 40 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
So I've been working at this for a long time and really honing in. And definitely I made mistakes in the very earlier days. But now that's why I work so hard and make such an effort to not allow my thoughts to come into it. That's taken me a while. Obviously, if you're able to go to the next step, which I've never done in mediumship, and enter samadhic trance, then you would absolutely bypass the conscious process. And that's why Dr. King is so accurate, as well as being so elevated. And I'm in the kindergarten, I'm not even in the comparable with what he did. All this does, I think, is prove mediumship. Unless you think I'm an outstanding, brilliant writer, which thank you very much.
Yeah, okay.
But the first thing happened, I went to Switzerland. I was sent there by Dr. King to visit a very good member of the Aetherius Society, actually. And I went to see him, and I was talking to him, bringing him up to date, an elderly member, about some things that are going on in the society. But I was in his apartment in Switzerland, and I had a message came through, and I saw somebody in military dress, sort of a white military jacket with medals and so on. This was clairvoyance.
Okay, yeah.
I had an impression of them, and there they were, and they said, go over to... No, I think, first of all, I've got to get the story exactly right. So I might have the order a bit wrong, but I said something like to this person, I said, Eric, someone's here. And Eric looked really kind of worried. Are you losing it? What's going on?
Yeah, okay. I feel sick.
Then this person standing there said, tell Eric he's an ass. Like that. So it was a very posh military gentleman. Tell Eric he's an ass, So I didn't do that.
Yeah, okay. That was my next
said,
question.
Go over to the bookcase and pull out an encyclopedia. It might have been Britannica or something. And he said, look up the name Rommel.
Okay.
I thought Rommel, that's a German general.
Yeah.
I looked it up, and he said, turn the page and go read out loud such and such a paragraph. Might be in the third paragraph or particular. And I read it out to Eric, and this described how Rommel had captured a particular British general by the name of Major General Victor Fortune early in the war. And I read this out to Eric, and his eyes popped out. He said, Uncle Vic.
No.
It was his uncle. Now, there you have, I couldn't pick out a book, read the only paragraph in a book which related to his uncle.
His relation, which you had no idea of.
Proved it to me, proved it to him.
Yeah.
And there he was. And then, of course, he'd come. Very common thing, to prepare him for his passing. It's the last time I actually saw him alive. And it was a message that often happens. A relative might come and sort of give some consoling message. But that's how it started, though. So that was the first time I had, as you might say, absolute carte blanche proof. Not the last, by any means. And then it went from there. And in that case, I wasn't getting a word-for-word communication like I'm getting with these literary giants.
So what would you consider?
And also, may I just, sorry to interrupt you, say that called Major General Victor Fortune, with all greatest respect to him, is not on, I wouldn't have thought anyway, anywhere near as high a realm as these three. These three may not all be on the same realm, by the way, but they're certainly on very high realms, I believe.
Yeah, okay. And so when you were saying you didn't literally hear the words, was it more of like a telepathic impression?
So it starts as an impression.
Okay.
And, I've had an impression is fine, as long as you know it's an impression.
And not your imagination,
And not your imagination. Then as I developed, so it's a combination of telepathy, clairaudience, and clairvoyance. I think clairaudience is very useful. Now, let me just say quickly here, because we could go off on quite a thing on this, but hearing voices can be dangerous. I want to put that out right now.
Sure.
And it can be a form of schizophrenia.
Sure.
And your imagination can kick in. So there's all the difference in the world between that, a mental health condition where you think you're hearing voices and actually it's your imagination. Although I will say that some people who are, considered to be diagnosed as schizophrenic and, imagining they're hearing voices could, in some cases, be hearing lower entities. So there is this crossover, actually, between mental health sometimes and psychic experiences. But none of that is what we should be seeking. You're seeking to have, a clear message. If you don't know, and very often you won't know, that doesn't matter. 3 of the most useful words in the developing psychic's vocabulary are, I don't know. And psychics often find it difficult to say that. They think they've got to know everything. I went to do a radio interview once, and there was a policeman there. It was about unlock your psychic powers.
Oh, yeah.
And when I got to the studio, I think it was Radio London, this policeman was also being interviewed about something. I asked, where is the gentleman's toilet, please? And this idiot, as I would like to say, this policeman thought he was being very funny, actually. Said, oh, you're psychic, you should know that.
Okay.
And I thought,
okay.
The day I use my psychic powers to find a toilet, I'm giving up.
Yeah, instead of world service and other things they're called to do. Yeah, okay. So that's fascinating about, that first experience. So that's kind of the first kind of proof, as you say, of like that this was definitely something.
To me, it proved it to me.
A genuine outside
and to
impression.
Eric, because
of course.
He hadn't told me. I had no idea. It wasn't the same name, by the way. He wasn't called Eric Fortune.
I see.
So, it was on his mother's side.
Even more so. So
I
not
didn't
only,
know his mother's
not only
name.
the book, not only the paragraph, but then reading that and not even...
That was a carte
It's not like you could pick that out.
Some real conspiracy theorist could say, well, Richard Lawrence found out about this, went over, set the thing up. You can always come up with that, but that's why I always tell people to unlock your psychic powers, because then you know.
For yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've run an Unlock Your Psychic Powers workshop, and I've had somebody who's never done it before in that workshop giving a psychometric reading to somebody else they've never met before, and say to them, you've got a puma.
A what? Like a cat?
Now, how many people have a puma? I've never actually met anyone who has a puma. And this woman had a puma.
That is
But the important thing was, actually the woman knew she had a puma, so she learnt nothing. But the person giving the reading could not have come up with that.
I see.
And they'd never done it really before.
Yeah.
They weren't practicing psychic. And I'll tell you the best I've ever had. I was running a workshop at the Festival for Mind, Body, Spirit in London. There was about 150 people in the audience. We were doing psychometry. And I'd picked up some stones from a beach, and I brought them to this class and passed them round to people who weren't psychics. Most of them hadn't done it before, but they certainly, if they had, they weren't practicing psychics.
Right.
And we passed these stones around the whole audience. We had a lot of them. And they were just asked to feel them and give their impressions. And what I was hoping they might think, okay, this is a pebble of a particular beach in Cornwall. I gave them no clues. It could have been from anywhere. You wouldn't know. It wasn't actually a pebble, little stones. They could have come from a path. They could have come from dry land. They could have. So I was hoping they might pick up sea or something general, and that would be good. That would be fine. And this is absolutely gospel truth, Darren. Someone in the audience put up their hand and said, I'm picking up Damer Bay. And Damer Bay is a small beach in Cornwall, and that's where I got the stones.
Wow.
Now, if you had, I don't know, Uri Geller or some famous psychic went out and demonstrated that, you gave him a stone and he picked the bay it came from, he'd be on a massive, successful, money-earning, probably, tour.
Yeah.
And this was an ordinary woman who'd never done it before.
That's what I love about the story.
That's
what I love about the story.
No idea what we had no way of knowing.
Because I think for anyone who's watching this and think I'd love to develop these psychic powers. Can I develop these psychic powers? I mean, there you've got someone, as you say, who's complete beginner, who's just there, sort of like curious, maybe even just to see whether there's something they can do.
Well, that's what I want. Everyone who comes to an Unlock Your Psychic Powers workshop, I want them to walk out of it knowing they're psychic, knowing that they are psychic, that they can do this. And I've yet to have anyone, I think I've definitely taught thousands of people, and there's only 2 people, I think, who've ever told me that they haven't gained it during that event. And we've had everything from what I just said to miraculous healings. Now, from there, once you get it, and by the way, those 2 people, I'm not convinced, but I accepted what they said. But fair enough. Had they carried on, they would have definitely experienced. But by and large, that's extremely unusual. That's less than 1% of the total number I've ever taught. That have, over 99% have come out saying, I now know I'm psychic in one way or another. Whether it's feeling psychic energy, whether it's tuning into telepathy, whether it's gaining healing power, experiencing healing power, or whether it be through some particular thing like psychometry or dowsing or whatever, they've walked out and they've got a result. And they've seen others getting results. Everybody in the class who witnessed this student picking up the puma gained from that because they could see it happening in front of their eyes. So now other people can doubt it, other people can do what they like. Who gives a toss? But and that's a starting point. Now, you can take it from there as far as you want to take it. In my case, one of the things I really, really went into and wanted to go into was channeling. But you don't have to do that. You could take it in a healing direction. mean, I remember a case where we had a patient came with a really bad foot. I'm just giving a psychic example here. And the healer was actually, in this case, using a pendulum with the permission of the patient. And they, through the pendulum, diagnosed that that patient needed treatment in the stomach area, particularly. Now, the patient said, I don't. This is my foot that's hurting. And so they did both. They treated the foot, but they also treated the stomach area. And later, the patient phoned up and said, that was really good. And by the way, I've got gout, I found out, which was a digestive issue. So sometimes these psychic abilities can help you. I'm sure many healers will give examples where, you can tune into people, you can do so much. It depends what direction you want to take it in, as long as it's a direction of service.
I think, and just coming back to those examples you gave, and people the rest of the people in the class benefiting from that experience that someone else had. I think it's two things there for me. One is that it gives you confidence. That's the first thing. The second thing, it also, when it's your own experience, it helps you to distinguish between what is your imagination and what is an impression, and begin to learn what that is. And it seems like that's what you're saying, like that's one of the keys here.
Absolute key. Yeah. And sometimes you won't know, and that's okay. That's fine. And sometimes I won't know. I might be driving a car, and a thought will pop into my head, which turns out to be correct and useful, but I'm not at that point in a concentrative state. I'm concentrating on driving. And by the way, don't do this while you're driving. Let me quickly say that. But you might be walking down the road. You might be somewhere where you can't really get into it. And the thought is right. And whether that came from a guide, whether it came from your own intuition, you won't know. And you don't necessarily need to know. But if you really want to hone down channeling, which I did, and you're not capable of somatic trance, which I wasn't when I did this, you've got to really focus so that you can tell I want to know the difference between the guide, the communicator, and me and my thoughts. And that's quite rare. I think a lot of mediums, you're getting a mix, and Dr. King has stated that. It could be 50% medium, 50% guide.
Right, got it. So take us back to this this third piece that you've got here, this one from Sir Francis Bacon.
Yeah. So Sir Francis Bacon, I found him to be quite, getting the communication from him, elevated, quite strict, if that's the right word.
These are your impressions of him?
These are the general impressions that I have of him. Quite formal, and sort of not a loose, relaxed, hi mate. Far from that.
Yeah. Okay.
But never that. Who cares about that? I mean, he was giving this thing. Sir Francis Bacon, of course. I actually went with Dr. King to visit a stately home in Britain that Dr. King was asked to exorcise one of the rooms in it.
Okay.
And it's now, I think, in the National Trust. But while we were there, our host at the time, who was one of the nobility in Britain, he had an original copy of Shakespeare, which are very rare. I don't know how many copies there are, the original, I think about maybe 5. I could be wrong there, but it's very few of the original that came out in 1623.
Wow.
And he had one, and he was showing us. And while he was showing us, he said that in his opinion, the main author was Sir Francis Bacon. And he believed that Sir Francis Bacon was an adept. And Dr. King turned to me and said, well, I've always said that, haven't I, Richard? And so he's a very elevated person. Whether he was an adept in that life, strictly according to the definition of the 9 freedoms, possibly not, but certainly, or he may have been, certainly a very, very elevated person, and put in a lot of the content of Shakespeare, and that's a whole other probably story as to why he needed to do that. It would have been dangerous for him not to.
It's quite a nice show idea, isn't it?
Given his position, it is a very interesting fact. There's a whole Shakespeare plan, and I have had messages from Sir Francis Bacon about that.
Wow, okay.
But I actually went to Shakespeare's house with Dr. King. We went together, Stratford-on-Avon.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
And actually, Dr. King had been overshadowed by William Shakespeare, and he was telling me about it in the house.
Wow!
And he said that he didn't like it. He did not like the condition, as he called it. He wasn't very impressed by William Shakespeare, the person. at all. But that will shock some Stratfordians. Or
okay.
But anyway, Sir Francis Bacon, a different sort of person. Interestingly, I found out fairly recently that he did a lot of his work on the texts, or compiling the texts for the Shakespeare publication or folio in Fulham.
Really?
Yeah, and
wow.
I could tell you that the building isn't there now, but it's in Parsons Green Lane.
No way.
Yes. So a lot of things have been quite interesting about that.
Wow.
I also got some communications with him which are almost word for word quotes from, I believe it's Romeo and Juliet and one or two of his plays, which I found later, and I hadn't known that they were from those plays. But this particular one was dedicated or inspired by the third freedom of service.
Please do.
I called it An Ode to Service. That was my title. Time passes only to return once more, like some forgotten stranger, eagerly embraced, only to be discarded yet again. Grasp the moment like a drop of dew from heaven. Seek out its source and quench your thirst, that others too may be replenished. Noble is he who stays in the ruins when others leave in search of fertile ground. And noble is the lone fisherman who casts his net in turbulent seas while others sail to placid waters. Mighty is the settler in desolate regions, mined quarries and dried up shores. Mighty too is the traveller who passes through this wasteland on his journey to another one. Glorious is the yogi who left sublime retreats for coarse and decadent environs. Oh, how glorious are the lovers of God, who never left humanity's abodes, for these are the ones who live the word. Their search is over because it never began, only as a byproduct of service. How holy is that word, and how perfect its enactment.
God, there's a man who studied the 9 freedoms there.
Yeah.
And probably the 12 blessings. I mean, there's God, beautiful, brilliant themes in there. I mean, introduces reincarnation, introduces going within with the motive of service. Actually,
I've spotted some things in here that I've never noticed before.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Pick him out. Yeah.
Only because I'm very focused on the now. And, of course, the first part of it is all about that. And this had actually passed me by at the time. I thought it was beautiful, but where he says, time passes only to return once more. So it's like time is a fleeting thing. Like some forgotten stranger, eagerly embraced, only to be discarded yet again.
Yeah.
Grasp the moment like a drop of dew from heaven. And that's what it is. It's a heavenly thing. It's a samadhic thing.
Entering into timelessness.
The now, yeah. And of course, timelessness. I'll tell you what I will do. I'll read a poem I wrote about the now, just so people can see
the distinction between
my literary abilities.
And
these three gentlemen.
Go for it.
And this is a short thing. It's a good thing, actually, but it's not in the same literary league. It's called the now. You don't need to be in a particular place to know it. You don't need time to know it. You don't need internal or external movement to know it. You don't need to think to know it. The reason for an experience is known immediately and completely. The reason to change is known without the need for change. All is known in the now, because of the now, and as the divine presence which it is.
Different style.
Different style. But that's a future teaching program, I think.
That's future program. Yeah. Also profound teaching. No doubt a result of your own experience.
That's totally from my own experience, That's not a theory there.
And I think that's a beautiful way to bring the show to a close here. So we've had these exceptional literary greats who you have managed to bring through and share, who importantly are studying these teachings, and they have this profound insight into the 9 freedoms I think they shared in each one of those.
Yeah. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Dante Alighieri, Leo Tolstoy, and Sir Francis Bacon for honouring me with their words.
Thank you very much.
Everybody's down here. Thanks for tuning into the show. Now, if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom from the 9 Freedoms. If you'd like to find out more about the 9 Freedoms, about Mars Sector 6 by Dr. George King, go to our website, that's aetherius.org. Richard and I love hearing from you, receiving your comments, your questions on your spiritual experiences, and talking about them on the show. So do write to us, share them with us at spiritualfreedom@richardlawrence.co.uk. Always remember that service is the jewel in the rock of attainment.